Acá estamos para hacer el vivo con Mike. Ah, ah, ah. Hey, ¿cómo va? Vamos a hacer el vivo con Mike Pecci, que es un director que hizo un cortometraje que está muy bueno, se llama 12 kilómetros, o en ruso serían, ¿cómo sería en ruso? 20 kilometrov. Ahí está, ¿cómo va? Hey, gente, ¿cómo va? ¿Todo bien? Acá estamos esperando a Mike. Véanlo el cortometraje si pueden, está muy bueno. Se llama 12 kilómetros, 12 kilometers. Hey, vi a Jane Cavill. ¿Qué te iba a decir? Así que nada, está muy bueno. A ver, está tratando de acordarme cómo sería 12 en ruso. Que sería 12 kilometrov. Ahí está. 12. A ver si se nos suma el amigo Mike. ¿Cómo va, gente? ¿Cómo va, David? ¿Cómo va, Lila? Ahí está, como siempre. Hey, Lucas, ¿todo bien? Ah, ¿viste? Sí, es sublime. La tenés, mirala porque está buenísima. Hey, saludos. Hey, ¿cómo va? A ver, ahí le mandé la invitación a Mike. A ver si está. Ta, tara, tara. Hola Lila, ¿cómo va? ¿Todo bien? Acá está. Sí, mirá la nocturna, está ahí en historias destacadas. Ahí puse el coso. ¡Hey Mike! ¡Hi! Good. Ahí vamos. And there we go. Y empezamos. I'm going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, and we are waiting. Hey, Matías! Hey, how are you? We are waiting to see. The, we are waiting for Mike. Ahí me dicen. Ah, bueno. Sí, sí. Hacelo. Estamos viendo, a ver. Qué raro que no. I sent a request. Yeah, yeah, I accept you. The problem is there. I am accepting you. Yeah, Instagram it always doesn't work very well. We have to change it, but it's good to do a live. It's funny. Let me see my and go. I send you an invitation. Let's see if it works. Yeah, Instagram is working every day a little. It's been working not so well lately. We see if we can. I send you the invitation. Uh, uh, oh, Instagram is really really shitty. Well, let's have patience. Let's see. Why it doesn't let me? Yeah, 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 it's horrible. Mark Zuckerberg is an asshole. That's the truth. Oh, why it doesn't? I mean, come on. Uh, let's see, let's see. I am accepting. Uh, if it doesn't work, we can do it on Zoom, and then I can put it in different media. Oh, Instagram is working. Ugh. Okay, let's go and That's so strange. It doesn't work. Ay, ay.
There it is.
Hey, finally. No, Instagram is the shittiest social media. Mark Zuckerberg is an asshole. I know now he's gone, and I know he's a spy and he spies us all the time. So, Mark, if you're watching this, fuck you. And
What's up, man?
yeah,
How are you?
I always, when I send, I use WhatsApp or Facebook and I send a voice message, I say, well, hi, Mark, go fuck yourself. And then I start talking.
Yeah, well, you know, he listens to all of them. He
Yeah,
probably has your picture on a wall somewhere.
yeah,
Watch out.
no, I know, I know. I don't want to imagine what he does with but that photo, but well, I don't know. Hey, Mike, it's an honor finally meet you. Actually, there's a lot of friends that are fan of your work. They have watched your short film. I love sci-fi horror since I was a little kid, so I cannot avoid thinking all the inspiration of the people who make because I've been watching the short films and well, I study economics, but now I'm doing the production and promotion of different films. I'm trying to join people around the world, right?
Cool.
I talk to people in Russia. Я говорю по-русски. Do you speak Russian? Да, я говорю. I don't know why, потому что я сошел с ума. Я люблю изучать языки. I love to learn different languages to
Well,
talk to people. So
you know more than I do.
uh, oh yeah, yeah, I noticed because it's in Russia would be 20 kilometrov. Yes, I know. I don't know. I speak French very. So we are organizing this network between all the fans that love sci-fi, fantasy, horror. I will in YouTube. I'm publishing the interviews because I talked with the guys from the Nordic countries. You know, we spoke with Eva from Border. She's amazing, and well, that's the whole idea because there's so many people that and we are not connected. We have to connect.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the key here.
Yeah.
Let's use the social media for something useless other than insult people or spy people, whatever. But congratulations for your short film. It was really, really amazing.
Thank you.
Actually, I have to say that if I have to think in inspiration, the first thing that came up of my mind, the idea, especially the ocean idea under the earth, I have to think in Jules Verne, because that's the most basic. And that key that put the ocean, the sound of the ocean was really a good, excellent touch. Because what I spend all the time watching short films from every filmmaker around the world, and I'm watching that they don't know how to use the different resources.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of resources you can build suspense out of little details without showing. You use the sound of. I mean, we're talking about the center of the earth. I'm here in the ocean. That's so. It's very clever. And again, if you watch old films from I don't know the 60s, 70s, Russian films, even from the United States, they use that because now everyone wants to show off the effects. It's not necessary. I mean,
No,
I was hooked.
it's not as powerful, man. Like when you go to watch a movie, your movie is using. It's different than if you're serving food, right? Because you only have use of two senses, really. So you have the use of sense of sight, and then you have sound, and so you have to use them both cleverly. And there's something really fascinating about presenting someone a photograph of something. So like if you showed them a picture of fire, but fire sounded like wind or sounded like ice, then you start to think really hard about it. You're like, well, what the fuck's going on here? And why is this strange? And so you can use, I think a lot of people forget the power of sound, and sound is more than half of a movie. I think sound is more important than good-looking visuals because people can't excuse bad audio. Like if you watch a short film with terrible audio, then you won't even sit through it. But if you watch a movie that has, you know, not so good visuals, then you can always say, well, that's the style. You can always come up with some sort of alternate thing for it. So sound to me, I'm editing right now. I'm editing a new short, and I've just been putting in sound effects, and I need it. So it is such an important part of horror. It's such an important part of thriller. Because if you watch a horror movie edit with no audio, it's boring. It's just people walking down hallways and opening doors.
Yeah,
So it isn't until you put sound behind something that it becomes interesting.
interesting because I have this conversation with a lot of fans of sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and we all agree. But then I talked with filmmakers, young filmmakers that they are starting, and they don't realize the importance of music, of sound editing. I cannot understand it. I was speaking with some filmmakers that doing sci-fi feature, and they haven't watched sci-fi films or horror films. I mean, I was starting to mention, I don't know, Jacob's Ladder, one of my favorite drama horror because it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have to watch everything, like the 80s indie movies, because again, you can watch a movie from the 80s low budget, but the low budget has a lot of creativity in it, so you can take a lot of resources. Maybe the actors are not so good,
Sure.
maybe whatever, but there's the creativity there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of my favorite films actually. Let's take something like Hellraiser, a masterpiece. It's a low budget film.
Sure.
I mean, but it's a masterpiece.
I don't think that movie is a perfect movie. I don't think that movie is. That movie just has a lot of scenes and sequences in it that stick with you. And this is an argument that I have on my podcast all the time. This is an argument that I have constantly. When you go back and you think of your favorite movies, for me at least, I don't go back and go, hey, the plot of this movie is why I watch it. It's never that. It's always like, here's this moment. Here's this moment where, John McClane picks glass out of his feet in the bathroom. Here's this moment where, I forget the actor's name, he's shaving his face till it bleeds while staring at a predator in a tree. It's never the entire movie. It's just these scenes and sequences. And I think it's just because we're inundated with so much stuff right now. There's so much stuff coming at us, and it's being churned out so quickly that everybody's so plot driven, and it's like, okay, here's the plot. And it gets real fucking boring because all the plots are the fucking same. So like it's all the story structure is pretty much similar through everything that we're watching these days. And there isn't time to discover these moments. And when you're trying to do things quickly, or if you're trying to appeal to a larger audience, it's hard to predict moments. For instance, I'm cutting something now that I shot that I planned out to be a specific way, but when I'm in the edit room, because I'm doing it, I don't have someone breathing down my neck. I have time to do it. And I'm in the edit room and I'm playing with it, and I go, well, what happens if I take some sounds here and so then I start to play, and then I find something really special and beautiful in this little moment, and it becomes this moment that I know that everybody's going to remember. And it was discovered. It wasn't written in a script. It wasn't outlined in some sort of screenplay book or some plot structure. It was just this moment, and I think that people forget that. That's why we watch stuff, whether you're talking about watching movies or if you're just watching a clip of a dog on Instagram. You're watching moments that stick with you and that resonate with you.
Yeah.
And I think horror allows for that. And sci-fi definitely allows for that because you're introducing a lot of themes subconsciously that are relevant to what we're dealing with, whether it's social issues or environmental issues, but or if it's just mental issues. And I find that to be so much more powerful because we all are processing in our own minds and how we're dealing with life and how we're dealing with what we're going through. And there's a lot of horror in your brain. So anyway, my point is that at the end of the day, movies, you should be using all the tools at your disposal to create moments, because that's what people remember more than anything else.
Well, talking about Hellraiser, one of the moments that really stick with me my whole life is Frank's when Frank reveals his body. The music and the scene, it's amazing. And that's another thing. The music was made with the specific instruction of create a feeling of something terrible that is hiding there behind a wall, like an entire dimension of horror behind the wall of your house. And well, of course, the composer is a genius. But again, we have a live with Roman, who's a composer. He composed for film, horror, sci-fi, and he explains that as a composer, you have to be directed as an actor. He say, I want people that feel that.
Yes.
But again, I see a lot of films, a lot of short films, they don't pay attention to that, to use that, because it's audio visual. So you have to try to breathe.
Yeah, I mean, with music too. Music is the manifestation of emotion. So like when you're just in your regular life, right? You put on a song, or you put on the radio, or you put on Spotify to feel something. You know, you may just want to feel a very low moment in your life. Maybe you're feeling sad, maybe you're feeling a certain way, and you put the stuff on. And then as life progresses and you listen to that song again, that music becomes an emotional timestamp for where you first heard it. And it takes you to a different place. And so with movies, it's so fucking important, because then what I'm trying to do is translate how you're supposed to be feeling during a moment with sound and with music. And it's such an important and successful tool where, like, I can put some strings, or I can put some drums, and I can make you feel anxious. I can make you feel sad. I can make you feel a bunch of different ways just by listening to it, which is really fascinating and fun. So I mean, you know, with short films are a great place for people to experiment and to learn their craft and learn their trade and go through that process. And when you're a younger filmmaker, and I deal with this on my podcast all the time, I talk to younger filmmakers. When you're younger, you're insecure because no one's born with the skills to make movies. The only way you can figure out how to make movies is by making movies. And most of the time, it requires so much money and effort and so many other people to be involved that you have to kind of bullshit your way into it. You have to kind of go through the process of saying to other people, you can trust me, even though you haven't done it before. And you have to bullshit yourself. And you're like, I can do this. I can make this happen. And then you stumble and you sort of trip your way through it, and you try to make it work as best as you can. And when you're doing short films, oftentimes a lot of young filmmakers are trying to recreate something that they've seen before. So like they just watched the new David Fincher TV show, and they were completely inspired by the lighting in that thing, and they're hyper focused on creating that to prove to themselves that they can do that. And so when I see a lot of short films, it's usually hyper focused on specifics. And the last thing that anybody gives a shit about socially or in the world, no one's like, the sound is amazing in this movie. I went and I saw this movie in the theater. Most people don't do that. Average Joe citizen doesn't go. Oftentimes they'll go, it was really loud, or I can't hear it. They're never hyper focused on that. So a lot of young folks don't give it the attention it needs. And you don't learn that until later, until you've done what I want to say is that, I don't want to say it's cheap. It's just the stuff that everybody's focused on. What kind of camera did you use? What was the lighting like? What was this like? And then when you start to screen your work for audiences, you go, oh shit, it didn't work. And if I had just done this, or if you're lucky, like I was, I shared a studio space early in my career with sound guys. And so when I was younger and I wasn't working, I would just go hang out with them. And I would go to set and listen on headphones while they recorded stuff on set, or I'd be in their studio. I remember my friend was adding sound effects to a Kung Fu movie. And so we spent months like breaking celery and like doing all like these really cool sound tricks that I started to discover as we were layering this stuff in. I'm like, wow, this went from being a pretty lame shot to becoming the most epic shot just because we put in sounds of carrots breaking and tones of this and that. And so you learn, and filmmaking is about doing and learning and spending time and being patient and just doing it over and over and over again. That's why the best filmmakers that exist are in their 70s, just because you need all that time to learn all these tricks. So yes, long story short, a lot of short films don't pay attention to sound. It's not sexy. It's not what they're focused on when they're young.
Here is Matthias. He's a young filmmaker, and he's a fan of your work. That's why I invited him. And it's that you say to him because he's doing short films. So pay attention, Matthias.
Yeah.
No, but
I'm taking notes.
no, but it's true what you say, and also the core of a good short film for me. I've been a juror in many festivals. It's the story. I want to empathize with the characters. I want to feel scared. I want to feel worried about the characters or hate them or whatever. I mean, to do that, you also have to start thinking as maybe reading a lot, not only watching good films, but also understanding the structure of the story. Even you can use literary research in order to create an atmosphere in films. I will give you an example, very famous, In the Mouth of Madness of John Carpenter. Again, it's not a perfect movie, but for me it's one of my favorites. But why? Because he understood that Lovecraft is impossible to adapt, because it's impossible to adapt to visual. So he used a literary element to create that. The scene when Sam Neill is watching the hole, you don't see what he is watching. You see his expression while there is the woman reading the description. That's a very smart way of creating an atmosphere without showing. Use it, literary, you are hearing the narration. So that's, you're using the resource of one media in other one. And again, that's wonderful how they do it. And about sounds, I will send you a short film that won in the last year in our festival. It's called Spyglass. It's from Spain. Masterpiece. It's very short. It's about a young girl who's babysitting a baby, and he's on Instagram trying to get people's attention, get followers. And they say, look, this acid bottle, I will drink it. Come on, I will drink it to prove that ambulance, they don't come soon enough. So come on, and people go and drink it, whatever. So she started doing that, and finally he had not to drink it, and he threw, because the baby is crying all the time, so he threw the acid to the baby, and you don't see the baby, of course, but you hear that the cry changes. Maybe it's a crying that makes pain. I mean, it's horrible because you don't see it, but you hear this awful sound of a crying baby in pain.
Yeah.
So, and then, well, this is amazing, and that's a short film. I say, oh, and it's terrible, but wonderful. the way they use this.
Yeah, they burned a baby. It sounds really great. But dude. Cinema. That's why I do it, man. Like, this job sucks. Like, being a filmmaker sucks. Like, it's vicious. It's like, it's exhilarating. It's devastating. It's just shitty. And you don't expect to make money. It's like, a hard fucking job. And the only reason to do it is for everything that we're talking about. Like just sitting in the edit room and seeing this thing start to feel like something bigger than just words on a page or shots in a bin. It becomes something larger, and you start to see this character, and then you spend so much time with these people that they become, some say they become children, but they also become lovers to you. Like these characters become very close to you, and you've created them from nothing. So that's the beauty in it. I think a lot of people get into this business because, you know, they want to make a lot of money, or they want to, you know, prove to their dads that they're awesome, or that there's some other thing. And at the end of the day, none of that pays off. Like if you're lucky, it does, but you have to realize where the beauty of this work is, and it's in the quiet little moments of reprieve that you get from everybody telling you that you're going to fail, and you looking at your stuff and internally saying that it sucks and everything that I'm doing is terrible. And then you just have like this little moment where you see something and you go, that's good. That's cool. That's it. That's all you get. I mean, the rest of it sucks. But, you know, yeah.
Asking about the film, I was saying that the different inspiration I imagine you of 12 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I start with Julio, but I also think of the X-Files because
Mm-hmm.
I remember oil. I don't know if something that was very interesting, and the idea, and also it's interesting because again the atmosphere you create is great, but again the characters, the relationship between one of the characters and his father, you create that empathy, that for me was a key moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that took me a while to find that thread, and that, because everybody watches it and they think it looks cool, and then when you get to the end of the movie, that's when it starts to really pull itself together. And it took me a while to find that when I was putting it together, and because I shot that movie years ago. I shot that movie in 2016, so I was a much younger director, and I didn't really have the skills to work with actors to mine these things. I wasn't trained on how to do it. And so I was lucky. I was very lucky with 12 that I had really good actors that were able to take my bullshit and make it into something really good. But we discovered that, and that was the end of the movie I cut first. So I edited the end of the movie first because I wanted to see if the movie was going to pay off. There's an old rule of thumb that you can make a real piece of shit as long as the end of it's good. Then the audience will still watch it and go like, "Ah, but it was great." And you're like, "No, the whole first half was shit." You know, so like, I tried to do that first. Yeah, I mean, I think that it becomes a story about. A lot of people see it as a story about sons and fathers and dealing with regret. I personally see it a little differently. For me, I'm a lot more cynical. I think that everybody in life goes through the same thing. So we all are born, we all go through adolescence, and we go through our teenage years, and we deal with hormones. And then we approach middle age, and we start to deal with death if we haven't prior to that. And we're all dealing with the same shit. And then your parents die, and there's so many people today that are so hyper focused on how they're feeling, and they change the world around them with how they process life, and they're very toxic about how they do that. And I thought that was it's a very subversive subtext of 12 where it's just like your selfishness and your processing your own life is affecting everybody around you. And so I feel like the father in this piece, the backstory that no one knows is that he was inspired by this creature to dig. and he was the one that set this whole thing up, and he wanted to change the world. He wanted to do all that, and he released this creature in airborne form that was infecting everybody and changing everybody's lives and controlling everybody. And the way that this creature works is the story that most people don't know is that in the planet itself, there's a chamber filled with this creature in its liquid form. So it's down there and it's trapped. And so as years go by, there have been cracks and sediment changes, and the creature decides to dry itself out, so it becomes dust. And as that dust rises into the ground layer, you start to breathe it in. And in its dust form, it's not very powerful. It can only influence you. So it will influence you when you're feeling emotional, when you're feeling tired, or if you're in a bad place, and it just starts to whisper ideas at you. And that's the inner voice. And so the creature is determined to release itself in this liquid form. And so it's convinced these people to continue to drill and continue to dig it up and dredge it up. And so that's the idea. And then the science behind it is that the creature it creates this sound in liquid form that is piercing, that keeps it in liquid form. And so when the dust particles hear that sound again, they become the liquid form, which then has the ability to manipulate people on a much stronger scale and consume people and do stuff. So it's very sciencey. I love the idea of mixing science with like legend and with mythology, and not really going the religion route, because everybody usually goes to the religion route for this. And I think there's something more fascinating about the science of monsters that is fascinating to me.
And well, actually, I want to ask you about the different inspiration you use in the visuals, because again, I can see a lot of references. But let's start from the beginning. When you were little, what was your first approach to storytelling, to the fantasy, horror, sci-fi?
Well, I mean, you're always, for me, you're always influenced by what you see when you're young, right? So when you're a young kid, what movies you watch at that time period are the movies that become your Bible, right? Those are the movies that, and especially with horror, the longer that you watch horror films, there's a side effect to that. It's harder for you to become scared because you start to see the tricks, you start to see the techniques. And so, especially as a filmmaker, I'm always looking for that situation in which I forget that I'm watching a movie, that I'm able to disappear into that movie. And whenever I'm coming up with ideas, I'm always thinking back to when I saw the movie that scared me. And so it's like Jaws, it's like Nightmare on Elm Street, it's The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, it's all those movies from my youth, which I love. And then when you're younger, you start, like I said before, you start trying to replicate those people. You start to try to like make stuff look like David Fincher. Everybody does David Fincher, but like, you love Seven, you love those movies, and everybody's trying to get on that road. So yeah, but when we started to do 12 km, I didn't want to copy people. I didn't want to like take scenes from movies and put them in my movie, which I think so many people do. What I tried to do was, myself and my cinematographer and all the people that I worked with, we studied the visual language of a lot of the directors that we love. So we studied the visual language of Steven Spielberg. We studied the visual language of John Carpenter. We studied the visual language of David Lynch. And by that, I mean, I would watch movies and feel a certain way. So I would watch a movie and go, I'm feeling anxious, right? And so then I would stop the scene and go, okay, let's examine the language of this scene and figure out why I'm feeling anxious. What is he doing? And then as you watch multiple films from that director, you start to see their toolbox. You start to see what their arsenal is. Like Spielberg has this trick, and it's on the internet, so I'm not the guy that's releasing this, but Spielberg has this trick where when he's giving exposition in his older films, characters are usually walking from left to right on a screen. So as they walk in one direction, that's an exposition direction. And so you're like, oh, that's fascinating. And so then as I'm planning out 12KM, I'm using these language rules in my planning for it. And so then I will storyboard it and I go, okay, we'll do an exposition thing here. We'll do a stretch pull here. We'll do this here. We'll do that from all these different guys that I really like. And then I make my movie doing that. I don't copy them. I just go, let me try to make something new and fresh in that same language. And that's why 12KM, when you watch it, I've heard this from so many people, they're like, it feels like Close Encounters, but it's not Close Encounters. It's like, yeah, it's because I use the same language, reactions, the same sort of, like all the guys when they hear the sound, it's all the same sort of reaction stuff that Spielberg did in Close Encounters when they were beep, boop, 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 you know, and they were all like, oh, you know, it's the same kind of shit. So, yeah, and it's fun when you're able to write something in that language. It's like if you're cooking a meal, you decide that you're going to make an Italian meal, or like you're going to make like you know, a Korean inspired meal, and you get all the ingredients, and you know, like I'm going to use a wok, and you know I'm going to use, you know, specific oils, but then you make your own dish with all that stuff. And so that was what the inspirations did for 12KM.
Something I also notice about young filmmakers is that they want to use resources without, you know, without having to do it. For example, they just want to put this resource just because they want to and because it's nice. And that's a common mistake. I mean, as someone who watch a lot, I mean, I detect that I don't know. I think you have to do is say, okay, what are the resources that I can use to tell this particular story? What I want to translate. For example, the other day we were talking about Satoshi Kon's style in Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress. He has a particular way of edit films. He took that for other film called Slaughterhouse 5 that used the same resource. And again, I can see a lot of filmmakers trying to use this resource, but without. But why are you doing this? You have to know how to use this, because otherwise it doesn't work. I mean, but on the other hand, I watched a movie called Lenny that used this resource, but use it well because it applies to that particular story.
Yes, and at the end of the day, you're asking yourself. You have to be asking yourself, what do I want the audience to feel here? And so if I want the audience to feel this thing, where have I seen something or heard something that made me feel that? And oftentimes you go to cinema because that's where a lot of people go, but it could be life. It could be in real life that you've seen something and you've heard this thing and that triggered such a strong emotion to you. And then you've told it to somebody else in real life and then they feel the same thing. And you're like, oh, this is a great tool for this specific emotion. That's what you're supposed to be using it for. I think if you're just replicating things, once again, you're just proving to yourself and to those around you, like, I can do what that guy does. And it's like, okay, so what? Like, I can break down anything. I can take anything apart and replicate that. Give me enough time to do it, and I'll do that. But all you're doing at that point is deconstructing something and rebuilding it again and saying, I rebuilt it. You're like, okay, but why did you do it? You know?
Yeah, precisely. If you can make something on your own, you know, why would you replicate something if you can craft something out of scratch?
But when you're younger, that you're learning. So like in that deconstruction stage, you're learning how pieces fit together. And then what happens is you can't put it back together the same way because you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, you don't have all that stuff. So if you're clever, you're putting it back together in another way, and then you're learning something, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you just sort of take that thing away. And then later, when you've done work for a long period of time, people go, well, this is your style. And you go, huh? And it turns out that your style is how you figured out how to put everything back together in a weird way. And now that's your new vibe, which is cool. So,
well, I mean, I guess you both know Ryan Connolly from Film Riot.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I love the film Proximity. And right here behind me, I have a poster of a film that I did because I said, I love the film. I want to do something just like that. And it was, I grabbed the thingy that the short film had. I made it differently, of course, because resources.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I learned to do like quick snippets of action montages, you know, or how to make the film feel rushed. You know, how to create that. It was not about the end product. It was about, okay, now I learned if I ever want to do something that feels like anxiety inducing, I can use that. I can remember how I built that and I can use that. It's not about that short film specifically. It's about what I took from that.
Smart. I mean, the thing that you wish that you can tell audiences, and this is what I try to do with everything that I'm doing, is you want to tell everybody that watches your stuff, hey, I don't know how to do it well yet. I don't know how to do it perfectly yet, but I'm learning and it's fun. Like, this process is fun. And if you go back and you look at the early Steven Spielberg movies, when he did Duel or did everything else, he's just learning. And he was able to learn in front of an audience, and that audience was able to learn with him. And if you look at like a Ryan Conley, you look at like a Kevin Smith, where they built an audience of fans that were there to learn with them and to see how this stuff sort of comes together, then it's exciting because, dude, I saw an interview with Clint Eastwood, and he's what, like 80 something, 90? And he's like, I still haven't figured it out. I still don't know how to. He's going to die without becoming a complete professional. Like, he's never going to get to that point of like perfect.
Well, but that's why you have to love the process, like you said in your podcast. You know, that's why you have to be in love with the process. Because you know you're not going to get there.
But if we did get there, then we'd be done with it. Like, if you get there, then all right, cool. So all I have to do next time is like this, and this, and this, and this. And that's what Hollywood wants. Hollywood wants a formula where they go, all right, get a big actor, put some social issues in it, make sure it's this long, make sure it has this. And so for artists, when you get handed that formula, you're like, well, what the fuck am I doing this for? Like, isn't there like an AI that you guys could just get that does this bullshit that no one really gives a fuck about? Like, all right, cool. All right. So, yeah, I don't know. That's me.
I want to know if, now that I have the opportunity, thank you for the opportunity, Adri. I appreciate that. Mike, I've been a fan of yours. I watched 12 Kilometers, and I watched Who's There as well.
Cool.
I wanted to know, how is the different approach to making that short film? Because I think when it comes to Kilometers, you really made it an environment that was in crescendo. You know, it was progressively building stronger and stronger. And when it comes to Who's There, it starts right off the bat with a like really intense scene. So how was the approach to the both of them?
Well, both these movies, the reason why I haven't released them to the public is that they were never made for the public. So both these movies are proof of concept pieces for feature films. So there is a feature film script for both of those films. And if you're a young director that hasn't done a lot of features, the best thing you can do is to set your tone. And the best tool to set a tone is by doing what I call a proof of concept movie. And so in a proof of concept film, you're sort of establishing your style, your vibe, your voice, everything. Because when someone reads a script, it's just words on a page. And everybody sort of reads those words and processes their life experiences like, oh, well, this reminds me of Jaws. And someone else may read the script and go, this reminds me of like Love Actually. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, none of those really aligned with what the movie's supposed to be. So when I made 12 km was in result of the Punisher fan film that I made that I wasn't able to release. I had asked that entire crew to do this project, blood, sweat, and tears, and shot beautiful stuff that no one could see. So I knew that if I was going to go back to that crew again, I had to make something that I could make a little longer, and I could screen. I could do a screening so that the crew could be there and all their families and everybody could do that. So I took originally what was just going to be a very small sort of 10-minute proof of concept film for 12 km, and I made it into a 30-minute thing. With Who's There was completely different. We were already out pitching our feature film script to a lot of Hollywood production companies. And I went into a production company that I liked, and they said, oh, we wish we got 12 km because it went to Ridley Scott's company. So they were like, we wish we got that. And I said, well, what are you guys making? And so I looked at their formula, and I looked around and I said, oh, you guys have a formula for how you make your movies. So I went back to my writer, Will Simmons, and I said, let's just do an exercise and let's just write something that fits within this formula. And if we do it, great. If we don't, we don't. So we came up with this really great idea, and I said, cool, we should do a proof of concept, but it's got to be quick, it's got to be fast, it's got to be energetic, and then we'll just bring it into the rooms. So we came up with the idea. I came up with a short idea, shot it, edited it, and had it done in 3 months. So it was all finished. So that at the time I was living in Boston. So when I came back out to LA to do more pitches for 12 km, I went to my agents and management and I went, here's a whole new script, here's a whole new short. And it was just fast and energetic, which enabled it to be seen by a lot more people and quickly by a lot more people. So they're two different things made for two different purposes. But they're both very good and strange and different. And they both smell like me. So they both have my tone and my style. So,
yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, the new piece is even different. The new piece that I'm editing right now is, I'm trying to make it 5 minutes long. It probably won't be, but it's like a culmination of 12 km and of Who's There in one. So it's like this new piece that is strangely feels like the both of them, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, actually, there's if you want to make the audience feel a particular emotion, the good thing is there are infinite ways to achieve that using all the resources you have. I remember, I don't know if you heard about the short film of Ari Aster, Something Strange About the Johnsons. It's really, yeah, I'll send it to you. It's unsettled and it's uncanny, and the key element is not about jump scares or whatever. It's the idea. The idea is so disturbing. And it has nothing to do with jump scare, gore, or anything. No, even the music. It's about an idea. That's what really is, and that's something again filmmakers should start discovering, the use of an idea. And that's something I always in graphic novels find. Junji Ito is about the idea that scares you.
Yeah. Well, I think jump scares are powerful, but they're tools. It's a tool.
Yeah.
So like if you're doing a sequence and you want to get the audience's attention, you want to get the audience, you want to surprise the audience, you go for that. And I think what happened was that jump scares get the most visceral reaction because it's a jump scare. And I think that a lot of studio execs register those reactions. So like if you do like a test screening, audiences respond differently to when they're feeling internal dread or when they're suddenly shocked. And so like if you're looking in a room and everybody goes, oh, and like, remember they used to do that for trailers where they put a camera on the audience and they'd go, it's the scariest fucking movie ever. And then they would show an audience and like night vision, like, oh. So like that suddenly became a thing where execs were like, needs more jump scares, needs more jump scares, needs more jump scares. And next thing you know, you're taking what was a very delicate steak and you're injecting it with cheese. You know what I mean? And you're injecting it, you're covering it with salt, and you're just doing all this stuff so that way every bite is like, fuck. And people get tired. And so, like, there is such a thing as becoming exhausted by the technique. It's, if I'm trying to get something out of somebody, I'm not going to scream at them for an hour and a half. That's Michael Bay. I'm not gonna just yell and scream and do shit for that period of time. I'm gonna take a moment because it gives the audience a minute, like lets their ears come back, lets their senses come back, lets them sort of fall back into a place. And I think that's why humor is so important for good horror, is that humor lets them clean their palate. It's like having a glass of water before you have another glass of wine. You're just cleaning your palate. And the best part is that once they let their guard down, then you can really fucking scare them again. And then you can really hit them over the head with something. And so it's that mix, man. And that's the craft. That's the skill.
Yeah.
Is manipulation.
Yeah, and again, you have to watch all these movies of people that have achieved that. I mean, if you're a filmmaker and you want to do horror comedy, you must watch Evil Dead, you must watch Brain Dead. And again, you have to explore different sensibilities, and that's why you have to contact filmmakers from different parts of the world. Something that they don't do. I mean, I'm because I'm a freak and I like to talk to people everywhere, learn language, wherever. But that's what happened. For example, we were talking the other day with Nick Taylor. He has a podcast about a movie called Pussycake from Argentina. Oh. And one of the directors is an amazing director, Pablo Paredes. He can do Transformer with $1,000. He's a genius. No, you have to watch the film and then calculate the budget, and you won't be surprised. But he understands that specific cinematic language of horror comedy, right? Because he's a fan of it. But he has his own trademark. There is a movie called Legions of also Argentinian, that again, it's a horror comedy, but totally different from Pussycake. Pussycake is more like a gore fest, funny, at the same time it's scary. Legions is more about comic situations and then scary. So it's kind of a very specific thing. But again, all these directors that are friend of mine, one is Fabian, Matias know him, and Pablo, they spend all their lives watching different films. So they have like mixed in their brain something. And that's something I recommend to young directors.
Well, and here's something that I talked about on one of my recent episodes of the podcast. I had a writer on the show who was a reader for Warner Brothers for years, and that's how he started. And he wrote this book on how to build moments for characters, how to work with actors, and how to build moments for characters. It's a good book. And we had this long conversation, and he kind of blew my mind a little bit. And he said to me, well, if you really, what you should do, which is kind of psychopathic, what you should do is have a diary. And so every time something happens in your life, like if you get into a fight with your wife, go through the fight, then go write down in your diary what you were looking at, what you were focusing on, what colors were in the room, what it sounded like, what it tasted like. And then the next time you're in the fucking line at the registry to get your license, write down what it looked like, write what it felt like. And his theory is that you are starting to put together a diary of physical, like sort of a detailed catalog of how your senses were processing emotion. And so then when you're looking through a script, or if you're working on a scene and you're like, wow, I know what would happen in a movie here. I know that this would be where they shoot it with a 2-shot and there's music swell and everything else. But if you have that diary of your life experiences, then you're pulling from something completely fucking new. And if you now know the rules and the language, you can go, yeah, I know that John Carpenter did this in his movie, but that's not how I felt when I walked through a parking lot late at night and the lights on the fucking, all of a sudden all the lights on the car alarms went off. That's not what I saw. I saw this. And so then you're able to make that into something completely new. And just as terrifying because you're still making notes of how it emotionally affected you and what it was that emotionally affected you. Was it the way it looked? Was it the way it sounded? Was it the way it smelled? And then how did your body react to that? What did your body do in those sequences? Oh, that's fucking cool. You know?
Oh, yes, totally. And I want to ask you about the disturbing moments in cinema and which are the reasons, because, well, you have jump scares that if you know how to use it, you can use it well. But if you do it too much, people, I have the experience of watching a film that used too much jump scares. It was the first time for the director doing horror. So it's a common mistake. They're just, doing all the time. So let's explore, let's do this exercise. Let's think about disturbing scene and which research they are doing. It can be an idea, it can be a sound. The idea of the baby, when you heard the cry after the girl showed the acid, the Ari Aster short film where we have a son abusing the father. So that's so sick. I mean, and that's something I really, I mean, a good horror film that sticks in time, disturb you, doesn't scare you.
Right.
I mean, scary is just for a moment. If you want to stick with, to scare someone, you can use it in many ways. Like in drama, Jacob's Ladder. I remember thinking about death and crying in a horror film. That's so, and that's wonderful. When you can use drama, for example, to get you there in the court to an idea of losing, of fear of dying, fear of losing your mind. That's terrible. That's really, really scary.
Yeah. I know a scene that comes to mind. I would say a very disturbing scene that uses all sorts of techniques in really, really well done ways is Eastern Promises. The scene where, what's his name? The lead actor.
Viggo Mortensen.
Has to defend himself naked in the steam room. And just the vulnerability, I mean, it's Cronenberg, right? So Cronenberg already has this body horror craziness that he does. So you just feel gross when you watch his movies because of his obsession, his fetish with body horror. And so you're already on edge because you're like, ugh, okay, what the fuck's going to happen? And then this guy pulls out this like curved little knife and you're like, oh shit. And you've already seen glimpses of, his Viggo's penis. And you've seen him as the most exposed that you could possibly be in a fight situation like that. And then it's all about the sounds of water and then flesh because he's barefooted, sort of slapping on tiles and that tile stuff, and then the metallic sounds of the blade. And then as you're watching, I was watching that movie and just holding my crotch the whole time, just going like, God damn. Like, and it wasn't necessarily violent. I mean, it was violent, but it wasn't gory. I don't even think I don't remember there being, I mean, he didn't get his dick cut off. And I don't remember there being any sort of blood in that sequence. Maybe he got his back cut. But I just remember just being purely disturbed by that in a great, I was smiling through it because I'm twisted and I'm like, fuck, this is really good. Like, so yeah, I think that's the scene that comes to mind when you mentioned that.
We almost finished because this time was 1 hour. Mike, we are going to do different events in different countries. In Buenos Aires in June, we are going to organize the Triumph, also in Mexico. Would you like to come to Buenos Aires in June? That would be great. I'm inviting a lot of people.
I would love that. I mean, talk to me about it as we get